Artsy, Chapter 15, The City of the Rush. I had traveled with the caravan for a few months, and during that time, the subject of selling a he and the others as slaves never arose, and it was an anathema to deny a person's free will, and even the woman had a choice in the matter, and this choice was subverted to the traditional societal pressures like the threat of poverty. And this vast region had shifting borders, and since the land was mostly bare and inhospitable, there wasn't an incentive to create deliberate borders, and most of the city-states were built around large reservoirs of fresh water. And there were a few towns that were loosely affiliated, and the tribal system still exists, though it was slowly given away to a centralized, autocratic government. Each city had its own rules and mores, and they also had their own rulers who maintained friendly relationships with the neighbors just for the sake of trade. And this emphasis on mercantilism created an unspoken federation among the 25 tribal leaders in the northern region. And once every 5 years, all of the leaders met in an undisclosed location to agree on the rules that affected that affected them all. And other cities had 2 or 3 walls and a few unincorporated lateral landscapes for defense. And the inner wall was reserved for the castle and the temple head, and all of the head temples were known to be varied. And this was due to the region's bizarre religious practices. And the names of all of the deities and what they were about had to be kept secret. The army, the king, and the guilds, and even the individual households had their own patron god. And the name was kept a secret to prevent their neighbors from using their god against them. And this practice was naturally kept for everyone except the fans, and they told everyone about their totally amazing patron god, who listened to everyone. Today the caravan was seeking entrance at the gates, and the gates had intricate mosaic panels that resembled animals, and as outsiders, his crew did not have a rite of safe passage, and their appearance alone raised the usual suspicion, and in the continent of Persia, outsiders would be treated poorly and felt unwelcome. And since it was a merchant city, the guards had a gentler way of conducting the initial interview. And his party was invited to the White Castle for the interview, and they were seated on top of cushions within a waiting room. And the place was lightly furnished, and there was a gentle breeze that would enter to the large arabesque windows. And they were greeted by a savvy of old woman dressed in elegant green robes and held by a pearly crown, and to instill a sense of duty she was unlike the natives of the city. And she was a pale human lady that had green eyes and red hair. And she was the Hatiosha of the walls surrounding the city, and she had been invoked for the sole purpose of dealing with its foreigners. The Hatiosha asked Ahi, "Are you comfortable? Would you like us to bring you anything to eat?" "No thanks, we already ate," said Sin. And Brogilda and Bohen took him quiet. And the Hatiosha were a sort of guardian spirit. Homes, elements, graves had their own Hatioshas. And they were also a type of power akin to blessing, and as a whole mankind could only tap into the power of a blessing once per month, and more faithful individuals could call upon power of the Hatishas on a daily basis. And in this respect, Hatisha sitting before her was a physical manifestation of the divine blessing embedded in the walls, and due to their nature, the Hatishas were not prone to lie. And acting in accordance with the blessing inscribed upon it, the Hatisha said to us, "If you would not have tea, then allow me to disperse with the pleasantry. The masters are greatly unnerved by your presence, and they were hardly amused when I informed them that 2 of you were dragons." "So it is not as if we're big dragons," commented Saint Johnny. "We have never had pleasant dealings with your kind. 1,000 years ago, an ice dragon invaded our lands, and the ancient masters slew the beast by calling upon the sacred names of the Vakis of fire. And it's imperative that you understand why I recommend that you leave the city and never return," said the Hatiosha firmly. "If you are a guardian, then you must sense our intentions," said Ahi carefully. "We mean you no harm. There is rarely any intentionality in mindless destruction. It is foolish to defend your pets. Dragons will always be beasts," said the Hatiosha, raising her voice, and the walls shook a little, echoing her ire. He rested his head on his hand, and he closed his eyes, and he was thinking of a witty combat, and he eventually nodded and looked at Brunhilde, and she whispered on his ear. And then he said, "Intentionality is a human thing, and at most we try always to act in accordance with our nature, and if humans intentionally conflict with our nature, then there is bound to be problems, and unlike human, our kind does not take pleasure in bullying weaklings." The Hatiosha was silent for a moment, and then she shook her head sadly, and she disintegrated into a whirlwind of pink rose petals. Ahi and Brunhilde sat there for 2 long hours waiting. And Brunhilde amused herself by drawing, and Ahi started counting the tiles on the roof in a vague attempt to find some defined pattern. And on the meantime, Sin paced the room back and forth, and eventually Albiol entered the room with his 2 men, and he handed Ahi 3 armbands made of cloth, and the cloth had two simple lines, the top one violet and the other one blue. And his men were wearing red ones with a symbol of the golden sun. And he said to Ahi, in this city wear this armband. Violet means non-believer or foreign god, and they both won't let you in, and the blue means money or high merchant caste. You're welcome. And he put on guy clothing and cut your hair. This is only a suggestion. And goodbye, said Abio departing. And he came back for a second and he had times of wasting. But he done him put it on the armband, and he was folding his arm and looking up and said, I don't want to cut my hair. But he looked at Sin and Abio from head to toe, and by now his hair was up to his waist, and it was pulled back by a red ribbon. And he had a golden he was wearing a white medieval dress, and he had a golden plated belt with rubies and a buckle. As for Sin, he was wearing a white gray dress with a leopard pelt. And Brunhilde was wearing a similar outfit. Brunhilde put it on his armband, and then he said, "Surely, thank you." And with Brunhilde's approval, his party went into the city, and he was thankful that he was allowed to enter without having to cut his hair. The armband made certain that they were not pestered too much, and since present also allowed he and Brunhilde to go undisturbed, and it was unseemly for women to walk outside without a man accompanying them. However, this did nothing to get rid of the rooster. From time to time, a bride would try to pickpocket a heel Brunhilde. However, Brunhilde was always carrying all of the main items, and whatever they did manage to get was eventually returned to its rightful owner because of a curse. And it was better to avoid any needless scuffle with the local, and Brunhilde had the nasty habit of beating pickpockets to death regardless of their age or species. And the city had plenty of apartment buildings and private homes with a small inner walls, and all of the residential buildings were 1 to 3 floors high. And the homes were made of stone, wood, or clay. The fancier homes had elegant walls made of marble. And the marble in this region was either white with blue or reddish veins. However, this marble was often found along the coastline, so transporting it was quite a luxury. And other temples varied in shapes and size, and the officials were cigarettes which casted their shadows over the city. And there were only four at the 4 cardinal points. And his crew tried to enter one, but the priest naturally shooed them away because they didn't have an armor that permitted their entry into the temple, but still that didn't stop them from trying. By now we had found the marketplace, and it was located in the center of the city, and there were some makeshift shops and tents. And Brunhilde pointed to a shopkeeper. "Okay, ahora," said he, walking up to the shopkeeper. And the shopkeeper was wearing red robes and a white turban, and he had a black sash over his waist, and he had black sunglasses and a mustache, and upon closer observation we recognized him as the dubious merchant known as the Persian, one of our own. And smiling, he said, "Ahi, what brings you here? Want to buy more booze for another one of your little death parties?" "No, I just need information. How can I set up shop here?" inquired Ahi. Brunhilde and Sin came closer when they saw Ahi that Ahi knew this particular merchant. "It depends. One day shops need to purchase a rib from the merchant's guild, and it usually costs 10 darings or 10 siglos." And the merchant then took out several coins, and the figurines varied quite greatly. However, they had identical grades of silver and gold. And after sorting through them, the Persian held up a golden coin and said, "Contrary to logic, this darling golden coin is worthless than the silver coin, and in this place gold is more abundant than silver." And there you have it. Each region has its own unique coin, however they agree on the purity of its coinage. "So let me get this straight, you're here to stock up on gold for a cheaper price item," commented Sin. The Persian gave the thumbs up and nodded. And then he said, "On a side note, only the locals are allowed to own real estate. If you're planning on staying here for longer, I suggest you go to a merchant's inn. And if everything fails, read the notice post, and one can usually find a lonely old widow or something renting out a room." Following the Persian's advice, his party went to looking for an inn, and this time of year all of the inns were full, and there were merchants pouring in from all over the city. And it was the last few months before the monsoons made the roads impassable. And while his party was searching in vain for an inn, we took our time to read the notice board listing, and after sorting through the piles of spam, we found the rental listing. And when we spread out and observed the living condition of its proprietor, and our listener also did, accompanying of all of the wire topics pertaining to the owner. And eventually we found a few homes that were suitable to his needs. And we came back to him with the information we had uncovered. And based on his instinct, the best home was a two-story house owned by a 40-year-old widow and two of her daughters, and she was renting the home to save up for her eldest daughter's dowry. And Brunhilde agreed with us that the widow was her best bet as far as lodgings. And we led ahead towards the western part of the city, and the roads were wide and the homes arranged in a block format, and they had none of the medieval serpentine twists and turns, and the heat was scorching at 110 degrees. And he and Brunhilde were used to such hot temperature, however, Sim was melting, and he kept breathing his icy breath into his hand to shield them off. And we eventually arrived at the house, and this house had only one floor, and it did, however, have 5 even-sized rooms and a large interior courtyard with a fountain. And the front entrance was held up by a column of two columns of color blue and red. And the floor of the kitchen garden had a nice checkerboard pattern with it, and the windows were large with iron bars and red curtains. As he went out to the metal door, and he knocked 4 times. A tiny window with sparks opened up, and a middle-aged lady said, "Who are you? What do you want? If you're selling something we aren't buying, get lost." "Sorry to bother you, man," said sensing taken aback by such hostile tone. "We are here about the rooms you read," he said as he giving a warm smile. "Talk about crooked teeth. Whoever you are, let me see your money first," said the lady. "Fair enough," said he, and Brunhilde showed the nice lady our money. Brunhilde had unloaded some of the goods we had while we were awake, and she opened a bag filled with seagulls and 2 golden coins, and the lady eyed them with suspicion, and Brunhilde then held up a coin which the lady readily took, and the lady beat it down, and she smiled. The tiny window closed, and we heard a lot of locks and bolts opening, and with a completely different tone, the lady said, "Come in, welcome. I will be much obliged to have such esteemed dignitaries in my humble abode." Brunhilde growled before bowing gracefully. "I beg your pardon," asked the lady. "She said she preferred the old way you were talking," said he. "Is that so?" said the lady, struggling. She led her to the dining room, and she brought a cushion, tails, and teeth for her 3 guests, and her 2 daughters were nowhere in sight, and she probably had told them to scram whenever there were strange visitors prowling about. And the tea had a sweet aroma and was honey-colored, and the glasses had exquisite golden arabesque pattern on its border, and it was a delight just looking at these little teacups. And he lifted the cup and he traced the edge of the mug with his index finger, and the lady before was in her late 40s, and she was wearing an elegant red dress with faint golden lines for decoration, and the dress had sleeveless overdress with a large black borders, and she wore metal bracelets and a golden ring on each thumb. And there was a bit of an awkward silence for a few minutes, and just as he was fascinated by his cup of tea, the lady was fascinated by the 3 strangers sitting before her, and she had never seen people like them, and even the palace among their tribes did not have blonde hair and blue eyes. And there was also the occasional albino, however, no one she knew had red hair or red eyes for that matter. She wanted to say something, but she did not want to lose that possible talent, and all she could do as of late was to keep up appearances, and little did she know that everyone in the city was on to her poverty. Sim was the first to break the silence. "Nice house you have here, madam." "Oh, why, thank you. My great-grandfather built it from scratch," said the lady. "My name is Tawasi, and my daughters are Surata, and wife of Bientisa, and my household is one of the most respectable in the city. I am seeing Charles Jair and Pasha Kamal, descendant of Albion of the North, currently single," said Sin in mimicry of Tawasi's introduction. He then pointed to Brunhilde and said, "And that's Brunhilde, daughter of Flaminga and Mordred. She is also a descendant of Albion of the North." And then looking at he said, "And this is Artsy. I doubt you are in the mood to hear his long-winded introduction." And he bowed and said, "Oh, you're no fun. So, do you go to temple? The Ambas are my esteemed visitors and unbelievers, non-believers or followers of an unincorporated God. The Hatijas do not take kindly to unbelievers," warned Tawasi. Brunhilde and Izzy gave some thought to the answer, and dragons did not have a formalized religion per se. From time to time, they send their lucky stars that they were born dragons. And they also have some basic ideas about the afterlife with emphasis on reincarnation. They did not have a notion of good and evil or a strict code of moral. Unlike humans, they did not live with the uncertainty or fear of death, and as such they were never compelled to congregate for the sole purpose of begging for the help of a higher nameless God. And all those manners were released the prideful beings known as dragons. And Brunhilde eventually nodded and whispered to Sin, And then Sin explained, we don't have a temple, but we used to congregate as a group and hear the divine wisdom of the high priest. And he would teach us about the land and the sky and the spirit creatures that live within it. And he was making reference to the religious tendencies of the humans that live in the north. Oh, so you have animistic tendencies, commented Awase. It is better to have one good friend than hundreds of unreliable little spirits, my dear. And he, surely a refined lady that yourself does not indulge in so fancy. No, said Ahi flatly. Tawase decided not to push the matter further, and the Hatijas did not appear apprehensive, and we felt their eyes watching us, and she then asked the pertinent question, how long do you plan to stay in the city? Until Ahi gets bored, said Sim flatly. And how long does it usually take for her to get bored? Asked Tawase, somewhat amused. A year or two, and we definitely cannot stay more than 2 years, and by then our family will sorely miss our company, explained Sim, making emphasis with his fingers to tell the time. For now, let us say you stay for a whole year, and how do you plan to pay for your room and upkeep? The food is included in the price, and I have a permanent maid to put the house in working order, explained Tawase. Brunhilde has plenty of junk to sell, and I know someone belonging to the merchant guild, so it won't be too hard for us to put a foot through the door, explained Sim, pointing to Brunhilde's bag of holdings. And what sort of goods do you bother? Inquired Tawase. Trinkets, weapons, pottery, jewelry, and fur, but mostly fur. Brunhilde is a talented huntress, and she rarely wears up a sweat when catching her quarry, said Sim, proudly putting his hand over Brunhilde's shoulder. He quickly removed his hand when he saw Brunhilde glaring at him. This made Tawase laugh, and she asked, and what about you, Sin? What are your talents? I know many herbs and potions, and I can cure just about any malady that can assail a human being, said Sin, smiling. And you, Ahi, what marketable talents do you possess? I am a wedding planner, though I can also plan regular parties, explained Ahi. Tawase patted her lips and thought, as anything such a skill could be used to make money, then again, if they all claim to be so talented, then perhaps I can squeeze them for other words, thought the woman. Tawase then said, you are in luck. I have 3 bedrooms available, and they can be furnished in whatever way you like for a small fee. Do you want your own rooms, or will you be sharing them? She wants to know the price per room, explained Ahi to Brunhilde, who was a little pensive. 120 siglos, said Tawase, and we said to Ahi, another guy came earlier and she was renting the room for 60 siglos. I think she's trying to charge us double. Brunhilde raised her fingers and made the peace sign, and catching one of Brunhilde's haggling Sin said, she will pay for 2 rooms for 190 siglos. No, the standing price is 120, said Tawase calmly, but firmly raising her voice a little. And the bartering went back and forth for a couple of hours, and eventually Tawase's need to pay off some huge debts proved quite advantageous, and Brunhilde paid for 2 rooms and 6 months in advance, and plus meals and a room at the stables for horsing. And even with horses Artsy to consider, she ended up paying 780 siglos, plus a ruby ring for good measure. And now it was finally night time. Alright, that's the end of that chapter. Bye bye.